All right, here we go. This is the milk, the cheese tutorial. I got my 5-gallon bucket or my 3-gallon bucket here, and the first thing I'm going to do is take off at least half of the cream, maybe more, and set that aside for butter. Just doing that by skimming with the ladle, like so. And I take cream until it kind of can't get any more, so it's probably about 3/4 of the cream or something. If it hasn't set as long, the cream will be at the top, so that'll be a little bit tougher. Yep. And then we'll just pour that into our 5-gallon pots here. I put a couple miscellaneous half-gallons in there. So you, depending on how many batches you're doing, blah, 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 you can go from 4 gallons in each pot or so to 5 gallons. All right, here's the other 3.5-gallon jug. There's a little clicker on here to open it up. You probably know this already, but you press that down and that allows you to open that up. And we're just going to do the same thing, get the cream off here. So I've got about 8 gallons here, and I'm going to have to make milk tomorrow again, so I'm just going to go with that, but you could add 2 more gallons to that. Just going to turn the burners on, and you'll have my handy thermometer on the back. You can turn the power on. It should be already set to Fahrenheit. Here's the probe, and I like to let's see. I like to flip it, or let's see, put it underneath the lid or the handle, and then just let it dangle in there for temperature. Then on here, you can set the temperature you want to go to, and we'll set that to 90 degrees. Oh, I'm going up. So the alarm will go off at 90 degrees. We're shooting for 90 to 92 degrees. So when it goes off at 90, it'll usually overshoot a little bit. Then we'll turn the burners on. I got 2 smaller burners on my gas stove, and I turn them on full blast because I'm going to sit here and stir it with this whisk until I hit my target temperature, so that way it won't stick to the bottom or anything. You can definitely just stir it every couple minutes till the alarm goes off or it reaches 90 degrees. So stirring every few minutes, let's say every 3 to 5 minutes, just to make sure it doesn't burn and stick to the bottom. And then I start washing out my jars and buckets, stirring that. I'll give you a clean cheesecloth that's ready to go, but maybe on your second batch, before I get started, I wash the cheesecloth as well as I can. You can use soap if you want. And then when it's still wet, I put it in a bowl, put that in the microwave for 2 minutes just to sterilize it, and then let it cool down, pull that out, and then it's ready to go. If the cheesecloth gets cheese stuck to it, I soak it in baking soda for about a day in a bowl with some water and baking soda. That'll loosen that stuff up, and then worst case, you have to use a little spatula to kind of scrape away the cheese that gets stuck in there. All right, I changed my mind. I am gonna add 2 more gallons to make it 10 gallons total. Same thing with these gallon jars. I'm going to take half to all of the cream off the top with the ladle. Just dipping it out. Set that aside for butter. All right. We've been stirring every 5 minutes. That's the sound of the alarm going off. It's 92 because it overshoots. I just stuck it on the other pot just to make sure. So they should be pretty close. So I turn the burners off. Whoa. And now we'll get the cultures ready. Those are in the freezer. And turn that off for now. The thermometer. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to do almost a teaspoon, let's say 3/4 teaspoon of our culture, and you sprinkle that over the top. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. And then the other one, 3/4 heavy or 1 teaspoon little light. And then I'm gonna fold that back up for later. And it says to let it sit on the top for 2 minutes and then stir it in. So if you want, you can set a timer for 2 minutes. All right, it's been 2 minutes. And so we're gonna take the whisk and just whisk that culture in that we just sprinkled over the top. So maybe 20 seconds or so, just make sure it's mixed in. There'll be a little cream forming at the top too, you can mix that in. And then next we're going to let the culture work for 40 minutes. So set a timer for 40 minutes. I go ahead and put the lids on at this point. And then there's nothing to worry about here, so you can go do something else for 40 minutes. All right, time to put in the next stuff. I put in like a 1/4 cup of filtered water. Quarter to 1/2 cup of filtered water in 2 different measuring cups. Then here's our Canadian milk coagulant, or rennet. And I'm going to put 3/4 of a tablespoon again. This as well. I guess close to a tablespoon. And 1/2 cup of water. Stir that up. And then pull my lids off with a wooden spoon. I'm going to stir. Nope, not a wooden spoon. With my whisk, I'm going to whisk down that cream that's settled at the top again. And then when the milk's still moving, I'll pour this in. Then I'll take my wooden spoon and just gently, gently, gently stir it to mix that rennet in. And same thing with the other one. Whisk down that cream. Kind of get it moving so it's swirling a little bit. And dump in the rennet. Rennet and half a cup of water. Then just with your spoon kind of stir that in gently. They say you're supposed to stir from the top to the bottom. But I don't know if it's that big a deal. There's a little gnat in there. So got that rid of that. All right. Now put our lids back on and set a timer for 40 minutes again to let the curd form. It's been 40 minutes. Time to cut the curd. Here's the curd knife. And we gotta go and do like 1 inch wide cuts. Maybe 3/4 inch to 1 inch, and then go the other way to make little squares. Okay. Same thing with the other pot. Alright, so you can see what that looks like. And then we'll let that sit for 15 minutes once it's cut. Alright, after 15 minutes, letting the curd set. After cutting it, I'm going in here with the curd knife. I've turned the burners on full. We're going to heat it up to 110 degrees. And I am just rocking this knife in here at an angle. I'm just kind of cutting these little pieces down to like a 1/4 inch size and mixing it at the same time so that it doesn't get too warm on the bottom. Alright, same over here. Dragging it through there, and then if I see any chunks or something, I kind of try to put those down a little bit. But you can see we're getting close to little like 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch chunks is what we're going to, and we can keep doing that later. And then I'm going to get my wooden spoon and keep stirring it. Like I said, we're going for 110 degrees. We're at 93 degrees right now. And we'll just keep stirring this, basically constantly going back and forth until it's up to temperature, because it's easy to get it too hot at the bottom and then it will start to chunk up. Alright, these are a little too full, so I'm going to try to take a little bit of whey out. And then, since I got some chunks in there, I'll pour that through a screen. Oh, that was wrong. Alright. I'm going to go over here and pour it through a screen. Just so it's a little easier for me to work in these pots without spilling whey everywhere. If you're doing 8-gallon batches, they won't be as full, so it won't be as much of a problem. Alright, dump that in there. Like I said, you gotta be constantly stirring at this point so that it doesn't get too hot at the bottom or stick to the bottom of the pan. Woo! And I got my probe in here to let me know how warm it is. It's 95 degrees. We're just going to keep doing that until it gets to 110. Alright, so I'm using my curd knife again and running it through there, cutting these down because I'm seeing some bigger chunks in here. And then I'm stirring with the knife and I'm stirring with the spoon. Keep these moving. We're at 97 degrees now. Going to 110. Keep stirring constantly. Alright, I started reaching in here and with my hands so I can stir with both pots at the same time. You might not want to do this, it's a little weird, but and I can also feel any chunks that are forming and kind of break them up a little bit. You could also heat this up at a slower temperature with the burners lower. Probably would make this easier, just take a little bit longer. So I'm just keeping that hot liquid that's at the bottom stirred up so that the curds do not chunk up, even though they are chunking up a little bit. The idea is to keep them from getting too warm, and I guess supposedly it happens around 108 degrees, so when we're at 106 now, that's going to be the temperature where they do need to be stirred or handled like I'm doing really consistently, so we don't get too many chunks. And I'm breaking up the chunks with my hands when I feel them in here. I'm not sure if that's going to be the best way to do it, but to think about that later and adding it. So maybe I'll just turn this down to medium so we don't get too hot here. We're at 108 degrees, just a couple of degrees to go. Sorry, this is such a long shot. I'll shut this off for a second. Alright, so we're at 110 and I'm cutting it off at that temperature. Wash some dishes so that I can drain this in the sink now. Okay, gonna get this wire colander. Any colander will do. I like to compost the whey, but I'm not going to today. All right, this is super heavy. So pour the whey out, leave the curds in the pot. Of course, you can do this any way you want, but this is just how I do it. Now the second one, pour the whey out. you can break up the curd a little bit to release some of the whey. Just break it up a little bit as you're putting it in the colander and let it drain. And then you can even squeeze by pushing down on there a little bit. All right. Now here's the curd. Put that in there. Get this other one, break the curd up. So I should probably show that a bit. Okay. So here's the curd. And we're just breaking it up a little bit just by like squeezing it. And then put that in here. Let the whey drain out. Dump that. All right, put that with the other curds. So 2 big chunks of curd in there. And we're gonna break that up again because it created 1 big lump or 2 big lumps. Break that up. You could do this with a spoon too. All right, squishy, squishy. All right, we're gonna drain those one more time. So I push down and squeeze them in the colander a little bit. Here we go. Breaking them up. Okay. Now I put 2 tablespoons of salt in. All right, how about 3 tablespoons? 3 tablespoons of salt. And mix. And break that curd up one more time. And mix in the salt. All right. You can rinse all the bits out of the other pot. Or it doesn't have to be all of them. Because we're gonna get our cheesecloth that we microwaved earlier. And I have these rubber bands that I've tied together to make one big rubber band. Push the cheesecloth in this pot and underneath the handles, go around the outside. So underneath the handle, not on top of it. See how that is? Pour your curds in there. Ugh. Whoa, careful. Okay. All right. And we're going to put it in the cheese press. I have a cake pan here, that, and then here's the cheese press. So we put that in the cake pan, like so on the corner, and then gather up that cheesecloth. Just pull it out of the rubber bands. Some more of the whey will have drained off into the pan. Gather up the cheesecloth. Gather it up like this. Let a little bit drain, and then you can bring it over here and kind of ease it into the mold. Now you can arrange the cheesecloth a little bit, like drape it over and then fold it back. It's gonna be a mess at first, so no worries. And then this is a plunger right here, put that in. I use this 2x4 across the top, and then on the corner of a counter or something where you can get underneath it. Hopefully you have something like that. Use these clamps, one on one side and one on the other. And it doesn't have to be tight at this point, just a little bit of pressure to start that process. You can move it around so it's kind of putting even pressure. All right, there we go. That goes underneath. The short part's on top, and there's one on this side and one on this side of the 2x4. So let's see, here we go. One going kind of this way, one going kind of this way. All right, and then you'll just add little by little, add pressure by squeezing down here when it gets loose, and sometimes it'll start to get like the wrong angle and stuff like that, so you have to mess with that probably. All right, and in a little bit we'll take it out, take the cheesecloth off, and kind of wrap the cheesecloth again and turn it over. That'll be the next. All right, last segment. Oh, this is actually loose, but there's a little clip right here to release the pressure if you need to. And we're just gonna pull this out, set this stuff aside. Set that down and pour out the whey that's in here. Set that back. All right. I'm gonna pour out the cheese here and take off the cloth. So it doesn't stick. And we could just leave it on the bottom there. Could probably set this down, might be a little easier to work with. And then drape the cheesecloth around. Wrap it all the way around. Kind of drape it and fold it so it's not too thick in different spots. Then we're going to turn it over the other way. So the top goes down this time. Put the plunger back on. And then this Little bowl fits in the top right there, and the 2x4 goes on top. Open these up by squeezing right here, and then clamp that down on one side a little bit just so it's snug, and then go to the other side. Move this around a little bit to get it centered as much as possible. This is about an hour later. So snug one side down, then the other. By squeezing this little handle right here. Squeeze here. And then maybe come back and put a little bit more pressure on after another hour. And let it sit like that overnight.